Good evening. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Sonoma Planning Commission. And we'll start the meeting with call to order and a roll call.
Commissioner Barbose,
Here.
Commissioner Nugent,
Here.
Commissioner Willers,
Here.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Here.
and Chair Barnett.
Here.
Thank you. I would like to let the record reflect that Vice Chair DAMBACH, Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins, Commissioner O'Neill, and Youth Member Miller are absent.
Thank you very much. And as to the agenda tonight, is there anyone who would like to make any changes or alterations to the agenda? Seeing none, may I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbose,
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Commissioner WIRICK,
Yes.
Chair Barnett.
Yes.
The motion passes 5003.
Thank you. Mr. Heffler, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item is comments from the public. These are comments about items that are not on the agenda. There will be an opportunity for the public comment on all the agenda items as we take them up during the meeting. But this is the chance to bring up something that does not appear on the agenda. Is there anyone? Mr. Heffler, come on up.
Thank you very much.
Give your name, please, for the record.
My name is Michael Heffler. I live at 293 First Street West, just down the street here. And last time I was here, you all voted 7-0 in favor of our neighborhood to not provide the amendment to the cooperage. Since then, the city staff has also said that it shouldn't be approved. But we are hearing through the grapevine that the $1,000 team of that the McQuans hired to speak to the city council have spoken to them about the McQuans' contributions to the city, and that therefore they deserve something in return for that. And they are starting to, from what I understand, go along with that because they've been, persuaded by people who are, good at that type of persuasion. What I'm asking for is your help. If you can be at the meeting on September 4th and join with us to let the city council know that, this is not something, Teresa and I are both in Rotary. You don't give something to the city and donate something to the city and then expect something in return. It's not a transaction. The other thing that's problematic with this, and I'm going to be very, very blunt and not polite, is it seems that there's a fair amount of deceit involved in all of this. The McQuans are saying they are going to get more money by making this a wine tasting establishment. We know they're going to make their money if they sell it by the loss they get on what they put into it, not on that. And they're paying these people $1,000 an hour roughly to represent them. We also aren't clear, and again, it's because we're not clear, I'll be clear that we're not clear, whether in fact they are going to sell it or they're just going to move their wine tasting facility from First and Patton over to the cooperage. Because what we keep hearing from the city council is, well, it wouldn't be so bad to have a really high-end wine tasting facility there. Now, of course, they also aren't a stone throw away from the hot tub where those people who they're still asking for the VRBO would be staying and keeping us up at night. But it's a picture that, unfortunately, because I think they have done some good things for the city, and I don't like saying negative things about people, and I don't really like doing that. But this just seems to be something that is not straightforward and is not the way things should be. And so we would very, very much like and appreciate your help at the meeting on September 4th, if you're willing to show up and stand up with us with our neighborhood, because these are things that are not just going to affect our neighborhood. What happens when the next billionaire comes along and sees that this is a way of getting the city council to do what they want? Make some donations to the city and all of a sudden say, well, we want something back. And it's not the way to do wine tasting, not saying who's going to be the winery at a new spot. Both things affect the entire city, not just our neighborhood. So again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your public service. And we would very, very much appreciate any help that you could provide us with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else with a comment on something that does not appear on the agenda?
Hello. I'm Connie Schleyline. I'm the chair of the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission. And this is just informational. Just wanted to let you know that we're working on a public art policy. We'll be taking it to the City Council hopefully this fall. We're updating a 20-year policy, looking at public art around town, temporary and permanent public art. We have a wonderful commission that's working really hard. We've been walking the city, looking at spots that might be really great along the bike path, all kinds of places, entryways. So since you're in planning and since you're thinking about things like bike paths and greenways and all those sorts of things, we wanted to let you know that we're working hard and it's going to get kind of exciting. We've got a great visionary team, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Connie. Anyone else? Items not on the agenda?
Hello, good evening. Haven't been here in a while. Good to see you all. Callum Weeks, Generation Housing. I'm here because in 2018, just a year after Sonoma and Napa counties lost nearly 6,000 homes in the Sonoma complex fires, Santa Rosa voters rejected a local housing bond measure N, which would have raised $121 million and leveraged an additional $1 billion of housing investments when it was, quite frankly, thwarted by a minority. Just 38% of the voters were able to stop this key and critical measure. The reason why I bring this up and why I mention Santa Rosa is because it's the best local example we have of where Proposition 5, which I'm sure you know, one of our council members has some involvement in, isn't? And as you I'm sure are aware, this is a real opportunity to lower the threshold needed for affordable housing and infrastructure from a supermajority of 66.7% to 55%, which I think many of you would agree is far more democratic. And really, at the end of the day, I don't know if you've heard the news, but unfortunately, the major housing bond that we were moving forward in the Bay Area, it regrettably was pulled for a variety of reasons. Don't need to go into those details. So this really is our last opportunity in the immediate future to actually create a tool, a mechanism which will give us the power, the opportunity to advance the affordable housing that we often discuss in this very chamber on many, 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 many occasions. So this is our opportunity. And then keep in mind, this is not only for affordable housing, but also the infrastructure, something we have also discussed regularly in this chamber. So my ask for you, spread the word. Spread it as far and wide as you can. Share this information. You can go to yesonprop5.org and learn more, and I certainly encourage everyone to do so. And here's hoping it passes for the benefit of all of us here in this community. So with that, thank you so much, and appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else with a comment about something not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the next portion of the meeting, which is the consent calendar. We only have one item on the consent calendar tonight, which is to receive and approve the minutes from the Special Planning Commission meeting on August 6th. Any comments from staff on this? No. Any member of the commission have any comments or changes they'd like to, or corrections they'd like to make to the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Natalie, a vote, please.
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent?
Aye.
Commissioner Willers?
I was absent.
Thank you. Commissioner WIRICK?
Yes.
Chair Barnett?
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0-1-3.
Okay, now we're moving into the public hearing portion of the meeting. We have 2 items for discussion. Item 4.1 is an application for a variance and design review for a family residence at 429 Brazil Street. And who's going to carry the ball this time? Elena?
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes. Contract Planner Elena Lip. So this project is Uniform Application 2414 for design review and a variance for a residential addition at 429 Brazil Street. The project is located in the northeast planning area of the city on the south side of Brazil Street, near where 4th Street bends into and becomes Brazil Street. The general plan land use and zoning for the parcel and the area surrounding is residential rural. Across the street is hillside residential. And it is part of the it is within the historic overlay district. And the parcel is about 78 feet wide by 154 feet deep and is only about a little less than 1/3 of an acre. On the parcel is an existing single-family residence of about 1,365 square feet, a detached 287 square foot guest house, and to the rear, a detached 349 square foot shed. The house features horizontal wood siding, diverse window types due to additions over time and replacements, and the siding is painted yellow and the trim is painted kind of a deep green, sage green. The house was constructed in 1946 and it has been confirmed that it was, even though it was within the historic overlay and it is over 45 years old, it is not a historic resource per the HRE attached to your staff report. So the Morearty family are planning to remodel their home and build a rear addition. The interior would be reconfigured to expand the existing bedrooms, primary bathroom, and kitchen, and relocate the laundry and powder room to adjoin a new family room at the rear. The front entry would be reoriented so that the front door would enter the house at the living room, where currently a large window is located, and the project would construct a new entry porch facing Brazil Street. In total, the project adds 487 square feet to the size of the house, and the area of the addition is located over what is currently a brick patio at the rear. All exterior windows and doors would be replaced, and the roof would be modified to accommodate the addition. Additional site improvements include the construction of pedestrian steps and a pathway from the street that we'll see on some of the upcoming site plan slides. So the uppermost is the existing plan of the house, and the bottom image is the addition. This is the existing site plan, and the primary issue for discussion tonight is that the existing single-family dwelling is mostly constructed outside of the rural residential setbacks, which are a 20-foot minimum, 50-foot total. That results in a minimum of a 20-foot setback on one side and a 30-foot setback on the other. The remaining parcel area that is technically developable is a narrow area in the center of the lot that you can see as a dashed rectangle. There's 20 feet given on the bottom or west side and 30 feet on the north, and you can see most of the development on the parcels outside within those required side, rear, and front setbacks. And the proposed site plan would build an addition to the rear of the house that would be partially within that side setback. And that is what is triggering a variance today. And so other items you can see on this proposed site plan is the construction of the new entry porch and the new pedestrian path and steps from the street, as well as a rear deck. Proposed front elevation would remain largely the same, except for, you can see in the uppermost image, the proposed new entry that would face and be visible from Brazil Street. The exterior siding would be painted white with some black accents. The window finishes would be white, as well as the door. And the composite shingle roofing would be replaced with a dark gray. So all of other aspects of the project are compliant with the development code, except for that design review is triggered by the property's location within the historic overlay and replacement of all windows and a rear addition over 200 square feet. A variance is triggered by expansion of the residence within the side setback. The existing side setback in the area of the expansion is about 8.25 feet on the west side. Required is 20 feet minimum, 50 feet combined, as previously said. And the proposed setback would be 8.25 at one area and 14.5 variable setback in that side setback area. This evening, the Planning Commission has a number of findings to make, 3 sets. The first is the design review findings. Because the design review would normally be heard by the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission, but because of the variance, it triggers design review at the Planning Commission level. The historic overlay design review findings and the variance findings. And we can go over all of those findings individually if you would like. So Planning Commission may approve the request for the variance based on the findings that are provided in the attached resolution and staff report. If it determines that the requests are consistent with the general plan, special circumstances applicable to the property, property rights possessed by other property owners in the vicinity, and it does not grant special privileges, and that it will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity of the same zoning district. If Planning Commission determines the findings can be met for the variance to the side yard setback, then staff recommends adopting a resolution approving the variance and design review application at 429 Brazil Street, including action to approve a categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15301 of the State CEQA Guidelines as proposed, subject to findings and conditions of approval. The applicant is here this evening to answer questions from the Commission, and staff is available for questions as well.
Thank you very much. Let's start with any questions the Commission may have based on the staff report. There are none. Okay. Well, at this point, I would open it up to the public for comments and anything you'd like to add to what you've heard so far. So if you would like to come up and make any comments to the Commission about this project, now's your opportunity.
Excuse me, Chair, can we do ex parte?
Thank you. At this point, before we do that, if anyone on the Commission has had contact with an interested party regarding this project, now is the time to report it. Seeing none, we will move on. So if you would like to come up and make any comments or clarifications, please do so at this time. Give your name and for the record.
Hi, I'm Mike Morearty, and this is my wife, Margaret Morearty. I don't have anything specific to add, but just wanted to let you know that we're here to answer any questions you have for us.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Margaret Fotinos Moriarty, and Mike Moriarty and I are the owners of 429 Brazil in Sonoma. I moved to Sonoma when I was 8 years old. Life was very different then. There was one stoplight, and we all shopped at Food City on the plaza. My poor husband Mike knows I am trapped in the past, nostalgic for simpler times. This remodel is, in a small way, an attempt at preserving this magic from the past. We're trying to preserve the original charm and integrity of this small home and special street, Brazil Street, where neighbors from all over town walk the loop from the bike path on our beautiful country road. This is one of those special streets that is so close to town, but it feels like country. I'm a wine grape grower, and my family has grown grapes and carneros for 55 years. We are all about improvements, but we are steeped in the history of Old Sonoma. This is important to understand why we are not doing a major remodel on this home. We had other options presented to us for our design remodel, and we opted to choose the one with the most minimal changes. All around us on Brazil Street and Garricky are construction projects that are large. This is not our desire to do a large project, but we need your help to do our small project. This is the legacy we wish to leave in Sonoma, and we respectfully submit this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for comment and consideration. Who'd like to go first?
It seems to be pretty much of a no-brainer. I think we should give them what they're asking for. There's it already within the setback, and it was built before the requirements even exist. And I salute your small footprint remodel, and hopefully we'll be seeing it proceed.
Okay, anyone else?
I'll go. Yeah, very in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood. I think it's a perfect fit to complement what was there before. I was walking by your home the other day and wondered what that little piece. What is it? It must be an entryway, right? Just a little covered step almost, or covered porch.
That's the entry.
Yeah.
The plan is to change it, to improve it.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't make all the findings here to grant the variance in this case. As was mentioned, none of the surrounding properties conform to the setbacks as they are today. So I see no reason why not to approve this.
I have nothing to say about the project actually, other than this is the kind of project that we hope to get. And what I want to add to that is that, there are a significant number of homes in our community that don't comply with the current development code in terms of setback, that were built at a time prior to the current code. And in our future cleanup of our development code, I think it would be appropriate to consider some form of language that accepts and adopts the planning standard that an older home was planned with, as long as that home isn't being changed, right, significantly. In other words, it's not being torn down to utilize those same setbacks, but you're trying to make a revision to an existing house. That those, rather than bring someone in for a variance, that it essentially, that setback for that existing house is grandfathered for future smaller additions to the building, to miss this step, to allow it to move forward without this.
Okay, anyone else?
I echo my fellow commissioners, and on Mr. Willer's note, Commissioner WIRICK, this is a good point that as we go forward with our streamlining, we should take note of that.
Agreed.
Okay, so who'd like to make a motion?
Since it's up on the screen, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution approving a variance and design review application at 429 Brazil Street, including the action to approve a categorical exception pursuant to Section 1531 of state CEQA guidelines.
Yeah, I'll second.
And proposed to the subject, as proposed, subject to the findings and conditions of approval.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Natalie, please.
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent?
Aye.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
Commissioner WIRICK?
Yes.
Chair Barnett?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you for coming, and good luck with your project. I hope you factored in a more expense than you've been estimated. Okay, we're going now
Barnett.
to,
I need to recuse myself due to financial considerations.
okay, thank you. All right, the next item is item 4.2, application for design review and variance for a family residence at 413 Rosalie Drive. And are you going to give us this as well, Alana?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right. So this is very similar to our last project. The project is, however, located in the northwest area of the city on the south side of Rosalie Drive. The land use is low-density residential, zoning is low-density residential, and the property, again, is just slightly over 1/3 of an acre. The existing house is 1,108 square feet, single-family residence with a one-car attached garage. The exterior is a mixture of white stucco and horizontal siding and green painted trim. The front entry porch has wood post supports, and windows are the original multi-light casements. The building was constructed in 1951, as most of the housing development in that area was. It is not a historic resource per the attached historic resources evaluation. So the Eagles family is planning to remodel and reconfigure the interior of their home and build a 719 square foot addition to the rear to expand the living space and construct a master suite and exterior rear deck. The project includes complete replacement of exterior windows, doors, and siding. The front entry would be relocated a few feet to the west, and a new entry porch will be built. This involves a slight removal of living space to create a recessed entry, and the entire roof would be rebuilt to accommodate the new addition, which would result in a slightly different profile from the front. In total, the building modifications will result in a 1,827 square foot building area. So on the left is the existing site plan, and on the right is the proposed. All other aspects of the project are compliant with the development code, except side setbacks. The Northwest Planning Area Low Density Residential requires a minimum side setback of 5 feet and a combined setback of 15 feet, which will result in a 5-foot setback on one side and a 10-foot setback on the other. The existing setbacks for the structure are 5 feet on each side. So here you can see what the new front elevation of the structure would look like with the new relocated entry porch, new windows and door and garage door. The roof material and color will be dark gray. The exterior would be Duxbury gray with trim painted Puritan gray. The front door would be a gold painted golden archway, and the windows would be finished in a off-white color. So 2 entitlements are triggered, the same as the previous design review major. It is outside the historic overlay. However, additions to the structure in excess of 400 square feet and the changing roof, windows, and doors trigger design review. The variance is triggered by expansion of the residence within the side setbacks on both sides. And to review, the existing side setback on each side is 5 feet, and I've outlined where the proposed 5 feet on each side setback would result in nonconformity with the development code. Design review findings and variance findings should be made this evening if Planning Commission determines that the requests are consistent with the general plan, special circumstances applicable to the property rights possessed by other property owners in the vicinity, and this would not constitute a grant of special privileges. and that it would not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity or the same zoning district. So if Planning Commission determines the findings can be met for the variance to the side yard setback and design review, then staff recommends adoption of a resolution approving the variance and design review application at 413 Rosalie Drive, including action to approve a categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15303 of the state CEQA guidelines, as proposed, subject to findings and conditions of approval. Staff and the applicants are present and ready to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we will, has anyone had a conversation or communication with the applicant on this project that they would like to report before we proceed? No disclosures, then we'll go ahead and move into the public hearing portion of this and allow the applicant and or their representative to come forward and present any information or make comments that would expand upon or clarify the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Barnett, and good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Carol Marcus, 873 First Street West, and I'm here as a consultant to the Eagles for their addition and remodel to their home on Rosalie Drive. This is a request to add a one-story addition onto the rear of a one-story home built in 1951, continuing the side yard setbacks that were permissible in 1951, but do not comply with Sonoma's development code. As you've seen from the neighborhood outreach conducted by Kate and Phil, which I'm hoping you received today, all of the neighbors who responded agree that the request to add on to the home will not impair the neighborhood in any way and should be granted. Over the years, many of these neighbors' homes have been added onto similarly, continuing the 5-foot side yard setbacks that were originally in place. We believe the Planning Commission can make the required findings to grant the variance. The request is consistent with Sonoma's general plan. The granting of the request would allow the Eagles the same privileges enjoyed by neighbors without granting them special privileges, and it will not be detrimental to health, safety, or welfare. For the design review component of our request, we have tried to keep the palette of materials and colors modest to blend as seamlessly as possible into the neighborhood. The siding is cement board with battens, replicating wood board and batten siding, but more durable. Asphalt shingle roofing and aluminum clad wood windows, which try to replicate the original steel sash single pane windows that are there. We believe the Planning Commission can make the required findings to grant the design review request. The proposal is consistent with the development code, design standards, as well as the general plan, and responds appropriately to the context of adjacent development. In closing, I would just like to offer the following suggestion for your consideration. In the interest of keeping housing costs down in the city of Sonoma, it seems to me that historical resources evaluations could be preemptively conducted by the city for various neighborhoods developed more than 45 years ago in Sonoma to determine if there are any buildings of historical significance within them. This would relieve each applicant of a neighborhood the burden of having to pay for a consultant to produce an individual HRE for their building older than 45 years, as is required by CEQA, when they'd like to make an alteration to their individual property. In the year 2024, that means that any building constructed before 1979 is currently required to undergo an HRE if an exterior alteration is envisioned. I would suggest that only those buildings which are deemed historically significant under the neighborhood HRE be required to undergo design review if there is a proposal for their alteration. Furthermore, it seems to me that a simple one-story extension of existing non-complying setbacks onto a one-story home ought not to have to undergo a variance request in front of the Planning Commission, which I feel occupies unnecessary time and expense and causes undue expense for the project applicant. So again, this is all in the name of trying to keep housing costs down. I respectfully request that you grant the Eagles' request for a variance and design review, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, we'll close the public. Was there anyone else who would like to comment on this from the public? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this and bring it back to the commission for comment and action. Who'd like to start?
Not unlike the previous application, I have no qualms in making the findings here for the variance to the side yard setback and to design review. I think it's in keeping with the neighborhood. I think that to Ms. Marcus's point, many other homes in that neighborhood have undergone similar changes, and this is very much in keeping with that trend. And to Ms. Marcus's point about how the development code currently compels an HRE, your comments are appreciated and noted, and I do not disagree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I agree with everything that was just said and support this application.
Agreed.
Okay, well, who'd like to make a motion?
I will make a motion. I will make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the variance and design review application at 413 Rosalie Drive, including action to approve a categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15303 of the State CEQA Guidelines, subject to the findings and conditions of approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Natalie, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent?
Aye.
Commissioner WIRICK?
Yes.
Chair Barnett?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Good luck. Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda is number 5.1, but I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess if you don't mind. Drinking too much water. Call the meeting back to order. And the next item on the agenda is 5.1. I just want to note that I did receive a call earlier today from someone who's interested in the topic, who was wondering when on the agenda this might appear. I suggested, 7 o'clock. It's not a 7 o'clock here because we moved rather quickly. So I'm just bringing that up because we may get someone to come in, and I'm not sure exactly what the specific presentation will be under this agenda item, but I may open and close the public portion of it depending upon whether or not some people aren't here when we open that discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to our development director.
Change your name.
What is my name?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're now Ms. Lip.
Okay, well, hopefully you know my name. So thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Jennifer Gates, Community Development Director, and I will change my name shortly, or Ben can take my name for the night. So Ben Ritchie with De Novo Planning Group, our consultant, is here with us tonight, and we are going to have a presentation. So we just ask that we're going to get through the whole presentation and then have questions, just like we normally do with our public hearing items, get public comment, and then have more discussion. And that would be more interactive discussion. This is more of like a kind of a study session format. It's not going to be super formal in that sense, but we did want to make sure we got through the presentation first so that everybody can understand kind of how we're going, because we kind of stepped to the presentation. With that, I am going to let Ben take it away. We are going to tag team this, so you'll hear from both of us as we go through this presentation.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Chair, Commissioners, it's great to be here again this evening. So essentially we are continuing our previous discussions related to land use and our land use objectives and priorities as they relate to the general plan update. So this evening we'll be talking about potential changes to densities and standards within your general plan, potential changes to the actual general plan land use map, and of course we're looking forward to a robust discussion. So as Jennifer mentioned, we're going to go through here and we're going to hit some things and you're going to be like, ooh, yeah, I got thoughts on that. I want to talk about that. Let us, please, if you will, get through the whole thing, and then we will absolutely be going back kind of, there's 3-4 major topics we expect to hit on, and we'll circle back to those absolutely as part of the discussion. So just as a refresher, the general plan land use map and the corresponding land use designations in your general plan determine what can be built on any given parcel of land within the city. And the land use designations provide the details related to allowed uses, density, and intensity of development. So they go in tandem with the map itself. And as we are in the midst of a comprehensive general plan update, this is the ideal time to revisit your land use map and to revisit these land use designations. So what's been framing our discussion over the past couple of months has largely been driven by both community input and the focus of the discussions that we've had with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So some of the key themes we've heard related to land use are providing more options for affordable housing within the city, opportunities for expanding the local jobs base and being more economic friendly, and also the need to preserve and protect parks, open spaces, historical resources, and public gathering places. And as the Commission's aware, a lot of our discussions on land use topics with the Commission and the Council have been how do we provide more affordable housing, promote multifamily housing opportunities, and that's where a lot of our discussion is focused over the last couple of meetings. So starting with some of the lower hanging fruit, as I'll call it here, on some of our proposed strategies is we're proposing that the updated land use map and general plan maintain all existing parks and hillside parcel designations. And additionally, we're proposing to change the area around the Sonoma Overlook Trail, the Mountain View Cemetery near the Montini Preserve, which is currently designated public facilities, redesignating that to park. It's largely how the area is used, and we've heard community sentiment that could be some concern that public facilities drift away from the intended park and open space use of that parcel. So we are proposing that change on the land use map. In terms of the topic related to commercial development and jobs generation, your commercial land use designation. Currently, your development code requires a residential component for all discretionary commercial projects on parcels 1/2 acre or larger. And the residential component must equal 100% of the floor area of the commercial component. The residential may be provided on-site or via payment of an in lieu fee to the city's housing trust fund. And so Jennifer did some digging. Do you want to talk about this part?
Sure. So I have been doing some digging. So I looked back and saw when our our residential component was added to our commercial zones as well as our mixed use zone, and it occurred in 2004. And when I did look that up, we went and did a GIS exercise and pulled all parcels within commercial gateway and in mixed use to see kind of what's happened on those commercial parcels so far as any commercial changeover and also in residential. So what I saw was that no residential units were constructed in conjunction with a new commercial project. There was 2 mixed-use projects on Sonoma Highway that were approved in 2002. So where the hot tub and spa location is, it's got 2 stories, 2.5 really stories on the front on Sonoma Highway, right across from the Lucky's grocery store shopping center, and they have live-work units behind. And the other one that was approved in 2002 on Sonoma Highway is the office complex for Mary's, and then the residences that were placed behind there. They weren't constructed, though, until after 2004. And then there has been at least two waivers that I could find for new commercial development. And there's been multiple waivers in which there was conversion of existing space from one use to a different use. There was one project that I could find that was denied. And then 8 projects were actually providing residential on these commercial spots. So no commercial use at all on these commercial zone sites. And some of them were live-work units. Example of that would be on First Street West. And then so far we've had, because in lieu fees just became codified, we had one that predated that codification or resolution on MacArthur Place. We accepted some in lieu fees, and then we just required in lieu fees for the other hotel that was proposed in the plaza. So that's a little bit of the history of where we've been since 2004.
So in light of that information, one of our recommendations for the general plan update is to remove the mandatory residential requirement on commercial parcels that are 1/2 acre or larger. So as part of that, we would propose that you retain residential uses as an allowed standalone use, but not a required component of a commercial project. We see the potential to see increases in redevelopment and new development of commercial uses on underutilized commercial properties. So the thinking and the logic is that it provides a costly impediment to the development and redevelopment of commercial uses with this residential requirement in place. Having worked in a lot of communities throughout California, there are very few true crossover multifamily developers out there. You tend to see residential developers, you tend to see commercial developers, but outside of our larger urban cores, the San Franciscos and San Jose's, you don't see a lot that really specialize in providing mixed product types on a single parcel. And based on the history of the last 20 years, we don't believe, while it was a very well-intentioned requirement, it's not delivering additional residential units, and there is a potential that it is stymieing commercial development and redevelopment. So in tandem with this, we would really try to prioritize other potentially more effective strategies to spur additional multifamily housing development in the city. We're looking at potential housing overlays that would not require a use permit, talking about increasing residential densities and removing the floor area ratio and lot coverage limitations from the general plan, and we'll talk about this in detail on some subsequent slides. And also what we'll also talk about on subsequent slides is provisions to allow duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in the low-density residential and Sonoma residential land use designations.
And just to clarify, when we were talking about this recommendation for discussion, it's in regards to the commercial zone, not mixed use, just the commercial.
Just a clarification question here at this point. How is it that we're talking about multifamily housing development in the context of commercial development and jobs generation? In other words, you're making recommendations in the latter part of this presentation that basically has to do with a change in housing densities in, for example, low-density residential, which is a perfectly fine discussion to have. I'm just wondering how it's connected to the commercial development and jobs generation. Is this the quid pro quo that you're including because you're proposing the elimination of the housing requirement?
Partially. Yeah, I think the logic behind the organization of this slide was the primary recommendation related to commercial development on this slide is to remove the housing requirement. And we believe that that would be beneficial towards spurring more commercial development on commercial parcels. We're also keenly aware of the Commission and the Council and the community's concern about the importance of housing. And we did not want a recommendation to remove a housing requirement to be seen in a vacuum and have you think, well, hang on, one of our key priorities is more multifamily housing. So I was teeing up the subsequent slides saying if we are proposing to remove that requirement from your commercial designation, but what we believe not at the expense of a comprehensive set of strategies to still push forward for multifamily housing.
And let me ask a procedural question at this point. Do we want to talk about these items item by item as you bring them up, or do we want to go back and bring up items subsequently?
We're going to come back. So we're going to finish the presentation so you see it all. Like we said, we're moving you along through the whole thing. This literally was the beginning of the next slide. And so we're going to finish out the whole presentation, have questions, and then get more public comment, and then have an interactive discussion about each one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
All right, so moving into the topic of residential land use considerations. So as I've mentioned, the council, the commission, and the community have all expressed an interest in exploring tools and strategies to spur additional multifamily development throughout Sonoma. And some of the topics that have been floated by the commission, the council, and the community are removing density requirements altogether, allowing duplexes and fourplexes, triplexes in single-family residential zones, and promoting multifamily development projects throughout other areas of Sonoma. So a little more context, again, based on broad experience doing general plans throughout a number of communities of all shapes and sizes throughout California. The existing residential densities in your general plan now are generally quite low when compared to similar sized cities throughout California. And I'm basing that comparison again on similar sized cities, not dense urban cores. Currently, your general plan also specifies height limits, floor area ratios for residential, and maximum lot coverages in all of your residential designations. Again, that's very non-traditional for a general plan. Typically, general plans, when discussing floor area ratios, only discuss them in the context of non-residential uses, so commercial, industrial, office park, etc., and typically don't apply floor area ratios to residential designations. And similar with lot coverage. That's usually information or regulation not included in a general plan. So just a little bit of context here. This is a breakdown of your existing land use designations within the city limits on your existing general plan land use map. So as you can see, low-density residential accounts for 463 out of 1,500 acres within the city, which is just shy of 31% of all land within Sonoma currently designated for low-density residential. Let's see, the next largest number is public facility at 213 acres and 14.2%, followed by medium-density residential at just shy of 205 acres and 13.6%. So we just wanted to provide this information and context in terms of how your map is currently broken down. And there's one up there on the wall, and as you can see, there's a lot of yellow. It's about a third of the city is low-density residential. So in terms of, again, this is your existing general plan, so this is information pulled straight from it. Your residential densities, rural residential is up to 2 units per acre with an FAR of 0.2, 40% lot coverage. Your low-density residential is a range of 2 to 5 units per acre with an FAR of 0.35. Sonoma residential is 3 to 8 units an acre. Your medium-density residential is 7 to 11 units per acre. Your high-density residential is from 11 to 15, 15 being the max in the HDR. You have your housing opportunity designation, which allows 15 to 25 units an acre. And then mobile home is at 7. And then in your commercial, your gateway commercial and your mixed use, they all allow up to 20 residential units per acre, which is higher than your high-density residential, but they do cap out at 20.
So again, did some research. So I just wanted to show some examples from different time periods of development within our city for multifamily housing. And I was curious to see what previously we have done for the number of units per acre and for the different types. And so I specifically pulled out just developments that I knew off the top of my head from different time periods. So the first one is the senior housing. That's 176 units. That's 32 units per acre. That was done in 1987. Obviously, it's a large parcel. 1992, we did the Sonoma Commons affordable housing, and that is 22 units per acre. And then in 2017, we had 2 projects, one a market rate at, for the Oliva, which did have some inclusionary requirements, but it's at 19.7 units per acre, while our affordable housing at Altamira was 48 units at 24 units per acre. And so this is just kind of giving you examples of affordable housing versus market rate housing and kind of what even in 2017 they were kind of looking at differently. As we know, affordable housing does have a cost associated with that and typically requires a higher density to pay for itself.
So in terms of our recommendations, in terms of residential land use considerations, we are recommending increases in the residential density ranges for some of your residential land use designations. We are recommending that you include specific language in the general plan that allows for duplexes, triplexes, and possibly fourplexes in the low-density residential and Sonoma residential designations. We're recommending that you remove residential heights, lot coverages, and floor area ratios from the general plan, but also coupled with that, including a general plan action item to subsequently update your development code's residential standards, where it is appropriate to have height limits and height standards, updated lot coverages, and we would recommend eliminating floor area ratios in the development code as well as the general plan for residential development. And we're also recommending that the city explore additional tools such as housing overlays and housing incentive programs to couple with all of this. So these recommendations are based on discussions we've had previously with the Planning Commission and City Council. Didn't necessarily like the idea of wholesale elimination of density. And when you start to do density calculations for, say, a fourplex on a 10 or a 12,000 square foot lot, the math is never going to work at a low-density residential. But if the objective that we had heard from commissioners in previous meetings was to allow for duplexes or fourplexes, you could explicitly state that as allowed uses and then have those subject to the requirements in the development code in terms of ensuring neighborhood compatibility with still having appropriate heights and setbacks and design criteria so that fourplexes could blend appropriately with a single-family residential neighborhood. So in terms of our proposed changes, those are the ones bolded here in the right-hand column. So we are recommending that density be increased in your medium density residential from 7 to 11 to 7 up to 15 units per acre. For the high density residential, we would increase the max of 15 up to 25. So your HDR density range would be 11 to 25 units per acre. We're proposing to increase the housing opportunity designation density up to 30 units per acre, so it'd be 15 to 30. And then for commercial, gateway commercial and mixed use, essentially matching high-density residential density ranges, making the residential component optional in both commercial and gateway commercial, and standalone residential continuing to be an allowed use within those two. And then for mixed use, the residential component continuing to be required and standalone residential also allowed. So we had a couple of site-specific land use considerations that we were also proposing for inclusion on an updated general plan map.
I'm just going to jump in just real quick. So you received 3 letters for the 3 properties that we're getting ready to highlight of some concepts and ideas. I sent an email today, but they were all in the public comment section that we uploaded earlier today. So I do want to reference that as well.
Thank you. So we're basically talking about the Sebastiani property right now. That is currently that cluster of parcels is the only area in the city currently utilizing the general plan designation of wine production. And so we are proposing to eliminate wine production as a land use designation within the general plan and replace it with what we're currently kicking around the name of Sonoma Mixed Commercial. You don't need to get hung up on the name, but the intent of that new designation would be allowing for wine production and agricultural uses, allowing for hotels and other visitor serving commercial uses such as tasting rooms, and allowing a mix of residential densities and housing types with requirements for residential components.
So another discussion that's been going around that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about too is First Congregational Church. SB4 is not applicable to this site due to its location surrounded by the park. That's one of the prohibitions for use of SB4. So a new land use would be required in order to allow for affordable housing on this site. It's currently designated as low-density residential, which would be a single-family allowances. And so the church is exploring how you could get an affordable housing that they would like to see here, as well as maintaining the church use and the daycare. Currently, just for assumptions purposes and just for discussion purposes, if we assumed that 2 of the 3 acres would be used for residential, the existing would get 10 dwelling units of single family. If we used our current housing, high-density residential at 15 dwelling units per acre, it would be 30 dwelling units. And if we did high-density residential with that increased density up to 25 dwelling units, we would be able to do 50 dwelling units. We have reached out, the church has, as well as staff, to different affordable housing developers to see what that sweet spot is. And it's really anywhere between 40 and 50 units to actually begin to be able to develop an affordable housing complex. And I know that they're here to talk to that as well, of just kind of what they've learned through this process as well. So that is, just kind of one of those case examples of in certain situations is high density residential or, maybe a future overlay the appropriate land use for this specific church, or maybe other churches as well where SB4 is not usable. The other aspect is housing opportunity, which does obviously have a higher density allowance, does not actually allow any use but multifamily housing in that zone. So we did look at that. The last site that you did receive a letter on is also a site in which they've reached out for curiosity too, this is the site next to Friedman's. It's actually currently designated as medium density residential, both 200 and 250. The creek goes through both lots. So we have a 30-foot setback from bank on both those lots. And so one of the questions that came up in regards to the residential was, also future use next to, as we all know, it's the Freedman's Lumber Yard. That site had been used for some commercial purposes previously, even though there is a single-family home in the front. And so what would be, the request was for a gateway commercial, which does allow housing as well as commercial uses. And, what are the opportunities for this specific site at 200 and 250 Napa? And that concludes our presentation. And so we are open to having questions, and then we can get into the public comments and then discussion. So again, these are recommendations for discussion purposes to start thinking, and then we will take that input back from everybody and then have another meeting for Planning Commission and City Council together.
Okay, thank you. At this point, are there any questions for staff? We'll get to the comment and analysis portion a little later.
I had a question related to the First Congregational Church property. It sounds like the church would stay and be compliant with the residential zoning. Is that correct?
That's correct. So in the residential zoning, churches are allowed in the high density and medium density residential,
Okay.
and daycares as well.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, what we'll do is open this up for public comment. If you have a comment on either what's been presented or other comments pertaining to land uses, you're welcome to come up. I'm not going to use the timer tonight, but I would ask you, well, my preference is to not.
Excited.
But I am going to ask you to keep your comments concise, to the point, and if you go on, in my personal opinion, too long, I will break in and ask you to wrap it up.
I always love a good soapbox, so appreciate the opportunity.
Okay.
Callum Weeks, Generation Housing. Thank you so much. This is a really great presentation. Super excited to see what they're recommending. One of the things that I did notice, and this is a cause, pause, maybe pause with some concern, is in Windsor, there's a major parcel right next to the town square, and there was a project proposed there that was super low density. In fact, they were at the bare minimum in terms of the density. And they actually tried to go below it through a general plan amendment, which was laughable considering it was right next to the square. So I would only wonder if maybe if there was an opportunity we could increase the minimum in the high density development or at the higher density residential development parcels, because there is a possibility someone might take advantage of that and just try to build a low density project. Obviously, y'all are a little bit sparse on land, so any opportunity we can maximize development is something we should take advantage of. There is one piece of legislation I also want to share with you, and AB 1033, great bill. It actually allows you to convey ADUs away from the primary parcel and sell that and condoize it, so create an HOA between the primary parcel and the ADU. It's a huge opportunity for younger folks to potentially buy into the market, while also taking advantage of, the large backyards that I know, many people here have. And so there's an opportunity to potentially even put 2 ADUs and create some smaller housing types available to folks trying to get into the market. Really appreciate, though, generally seeing everything else. It'd be great to see, the parcels or greater lot coverage would be incredible if we could boost that on the high density residential and really take advantage of it. One of the things I would love also to see is us go up to at least 4 stories for high density residential, especially on the housing opportunity sites. With the large open space requirement, which is good, I like open space as well, but with the large open space requirement, we need some level of commensurate height increase so that we're making the best use of those parcels. Again, given the limited land use available and I think agreement across the board in Sonoma County that no one wants to expand urban growth boundaries. I don't want to expand the UGB. So we really got to focus on building up. So I would love to see a commitment to that. And I know a lot of this is going to take place hopefully in the development code and outside the general plan. I think that's an excellent idea. Strong support there. So hopefully we move forward with that. And I think I will end there and save the rest of my soapbox comments for a letter. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
My name is Kim Pack, and I'm from the First Congregational Church. We are a vibrant, forward-looking congregation that believes that the lack of affordable housing is the most pressing issue facing our community. As part of the general plan update, we ask that you rezone our 2.9 acres at 252 West Spain so that the property can be redeveloped to include the true affordable housing project. We realize that we have to follow the traditional approval process, but in the spirit of SB4, we ask you to give us a chance to make our dreams come true. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else have some comments?
Good evening. Caitlin Cornwell, Sonoma Valley Collaborative. The First Congregational Church project is really exciting. So I wanted to say a couple things about that. As Jennifer mentioned, the church and the city and the collaborative have been getting input from nonprofit housing developers to see what they really need there. And we submitted a letter about that. But just, I am not sure I'm understanding all the details of all the slides yet, but what all three of those developers said, their general rule is that they usually need 40 or 50 units per acre. And I don't think I saw that on any of those proposed revisions.
40 to 50 per acre or 40 to 50 as a minimum number of
So-
units for a development?
What MidPenn said was on that particular site that they would need 40 units total.
Total.
And maybe a few more depending on how complex things get. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there that is fantastic for the community. So that is another question that they had, is to what degree can the community or the city work with them to be sure to retain, for example, like the size of preschool that they have there, which takes some space but is filling an incredibly urgent need in the community. Childcare is vanishingly rare now and very expensive. So anyway, there's a lot to discuss about that project to figure out sort of a good design. But yeah, we just wanted to reflect back what they're saying. And of the three that conversations been had with, MidPenn is the one that just seems most like rolling up their sleeves and wanting to jump in. So that's very promising and optimistic, and we'll have lots more conversations about that. But that is what they said, 40 units kind of minimum total, however those get created. So another point I wanted to bring up is just from the learnings that Sonoma Valley Collaborative has made over our time working on housing, that the housing overlay seems like at this time a really good way to go for the city. I know there's been talk recently about how if increasing housing densities in general in these zones could increase property values to the extent that affordable projects become impossible, and affordability, I'm sorry, I'm misremembering the acronym. Affordable housing overlay, that's what I want to say. Affordable housing overlay, that would just create a separate lane completely for 100% affordable projects. And that would seem to just sort of remove that market value problem completely. And you all have talked about, and other people have talked about, a number of good-sized parcels in the city. I mean, there's not a large list of them, but that are big enough and have good infrastructure that could support a higher number of 100% affordable units. And those are the kinds of parcels that we think you should really consider affordable housing overlay for. As well as potentially these faith-owned properties. And other cities that have relatively recently done affordable housing overlays include Menlo Park, Corte Madera, Palm Desert, and Capitola. The county has, I think, a relatively similar designation called the Workforce Housing Combining Zone, in case that's useful to know. Otherwise, I would say in general, these recommendations look great. I kind of digest them more. Another thing that came up recently was that, I'm hoping I'm remembering this right, that currently the housing opportunity designation, am I remembering this right, that it doesn't allow religious uses, right? It allows no other uses. So that, I think, also is something that should be loosened up because people want to live near things like childcare or their church, and that seems like an unnecessary obstacle. And that's, I think, all I've got right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Fred Allebach. I live on 8th Street East, and I'd like to second what Kim and Caitlin and Cal said, and I have a couple comments here. I made a public comment that I hope got to you all. I'm not sure that it did. Sometimes they don't. But I went to the last task force, general plan task force meeting, and it was really good. It was really dynamic discussion, and the public could kind of have back and forth. And it kind of came out that I saw that there was really an ideological difference in how people were looking at housing and planning, and that kind of boiled down to the difference between the Turner Center and the Embarcadero Institute as far as how you look at planning and what's needed and what's going on. So what I'd like to ask is for the Planning Commission to kind of split the difference with that and bring a diverse palette of policy options that looks at Turner Center and Embarcadero Institute views and allows all of them to have a seat at the table, so that it doesn't become just all one thing, because they're all valid options as far as how they view planning and state housing laws. So I think a diverse palette of options is good. I like the outline here, and also account for changing demographic and the high rate of displacement that's happened in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley, especially since 2008. So since this is a 20-year plan, that, look at it as a way to adapt to the future. I've been looking at Measure O in Healdsburg, and they have that for boosting multifamily housing in their it would be analogous to here on Highway 12 and Broadway, and not in residential areas. And so that's an interesting thing, because in Measure O, the people who voted, they wouldn't vote for anything that was in the yellow zoned areas. It's all on Broadway. And so in the task force meeting that we had, Kelso Barnett, who's on the task force, said that anybody on the council who voted to upzone the east side wouldn't be on the council very long. So Measure O was only able to come up with this plan to put the multifamily housing on the commercial strip there because the people wouldn't back it. So it's kind of a similar reason to why the BAFA bond maybe went down. And so that was part of my public comments, was to, kind of eat into what people see as exclusionary zoning a little bit. And for Ben's stats here, I remember looking at UC Berkeley Other Belonging Institute map that showed that Sonoma had 65% single-family zoning. So I'm not sure if that's an old stat or how they came up with that, but you know, there is a lot. And let me see if I can go through here. I know JJ is here. I'm not sure if he's going to talk, but I know that that Sebastiani site, at least at the time that the general plan data cutoff is that was a tax credit highest opportunity area. And so those are areas that are supposed to be used with affirmatively furthering fair housing to key in on to, you know, bring in lower income housing. I made some suggestions for site-specific land use. My ideas are probably, you know, not germane to Sonoma, like go after the Armstrong estate, open lots. I just don't understand why that can't be changed, but somehow that seems to be locked in, and that just seems like a place that people would look at and go, okay, let's do something there. Annexations like the Doyle lot, the St. Francis Preserve, you know, give it to satellite affordable housing and let them deal with the endangered plant. I talked with Jennifer about that. Maybe that's not possible, but so that's about it for now. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. Hi, commissioners, staff, planning committee. Tonight, I'm going to make 3 points concerning the general plan update, and really, this is sort of a bookend to a presentation I made in February that was a joint commission presentation with the Planning Commission and PROS, actually, about cool corridors, canopies, and tree cover.
And before you go on, can you give us our name for the record and
Sorry
the
about that.
recording?
My name is Cedra Nathan. So anyways, I'm trying to bring together a bunch of ideas about the importance of co-locating everything from housing to civic infrastructure, and the idea of strategic planning and equity, and a lot of things that everyone has been talking about before me. So the 3 points I want to make is that first, we should strategically plan and designate a citywide system of connected, safe, car-free pathways in the general plan. And these corridors would link parks, open space, and community assets, creating a network that supports safe, accessible, and sustainable movement through the city. So this is a strategic green infrastructure that effectively unites the green infrastructure that we have with the gray or the concrete, the zoning, and everything else, and the places that people need to get to, from hospitals to schools to medical offices, and enhance safety, connectivity, water resource protection, and provide freedom of movement to key city infrastructures, benefiting all residents and visitors. And these systems are often referred to in urban planning as emerald necklaces, green links, or you heard Connie talk earlier about greenways or green belts. And you see these things in general plans from places like the city of Laguna, Los Altos, Huron, California. They have overlays in their general plan for these kind of designations, the same way you might have a housing overlay or a historic district overlay or a hillside overlay. These exist in general plans, and they help frame this infrastructure and co-location of assets, vital assets for a community. The second point I want to make is the strategic layout of this is an outcome. This pathway is an outcome and result of thousands of layers of data, of this community feedback that has already been collected, and equity issues that must be considered in land use designation. And so these factors are indeed used in generating this map. So it's not that you look around and think, oh, well, these are good parcels or good backbones. That's an outcome of equity issues that must be realized in the creation of these land use zones and maps, so that equity can be realized and seen in a physical way on the landscape. So we see equity mentioned a lot in the draft plan, but we want to see it physically in connecting our communities. And finally, I'd like to ask you to imagine a city where no resources are isolated. That's the key point, is there's no barriers or disjointed, dangerous obstacles that limit movement. And so you picture kids crossing streets safely and elderly having ample time to get from point A to B, and people of different abilities are confident in their visibility, and families can roll and walk and enjoy car-free spaces. And so you maximize development co-benefits. That's really what we're trying to do. And so tools like cluster development or conservation development unify goals of housing and co-location with pedestrian corridors. And these are tried and true partnerships that we already have in place, like easements or TDRs or pathways that connect this broader green links idea. And so we see this in state programs like the National Communities Conservation Plans or HCPs. These are used all over the place. And we could and should put this in our general plan. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? This is your chance.
Oh, one more thing. I just submit this with the map and comments because that was all.
Okay, thank you. Going once? Twice? No, it's okay. All right. Public session. All right, so let's bring it back now to the commission. There's been a lot of ideas that have come up tonight. Before we get into it, I just want to make one comment, which maybe it has to do with the way I think. But I do think that I need to get some clarity about what I'll call the decision-making tree here. What I don't have to refer to in making these decisions is a clear and articulate vision or goal or set of goals for what the determination has been as to what the community wants to be. Now, historically, my way of going about these general plan processes, and this is the third general plan I've been involved with, a sign of my advanced age, is that it was, in the past, a process of establishing goals, determining what the policies would be to accomplish those goals, and then the next refinement level down was the determination of the implementation measures that would support the policies that support the goals. Maybe the philosophy of general plan development has completely changed, but my mind hasn't changed, and unfortunately, I continue to find myself asking the question, as we get into these determinative discussions about land use, for example, what are we touching back onto in terms of the overarching goal? In the past, my orientation was if I was going to consider a new policy or a new implementation measure, akin, for example, to density, or any of the other things that have come up, they were considered in light of do they reinforce and support the goal. But I don't know what the goals are yet, because I haven't seen a clear, comprehensive, and relatively concise statement of what it is the community wants to achieve in the next 20 years as its future. And missing that, I feel like we're, unfortunately for me, it feels like we're pulling out pieces of a living system and dealing with them in isolation. And as those of you who've been up here long enough to know how I think of the city as a living system. And the idea of taking out a piece and treating it in isolation bothers me, because it doesn't connect me to the rest of the system. In a way, I can relate it to some implications of what I heard Cedra talking about, which is that it's a mistake to consider items in isolation. It produces a false reality, because it's basically based on a false reality. The word ideology came up earlier. Maybe Mr. Allback brought it up. Ideology is an interesting word. There's some people who define ideologies as false realities. They are essentially a scrim through which you view the world. They're a lens through which things flow, and everything becomes seen through that lens. And I'm concerned that without a clear set of goals that are in place, we're making decisions here that are ideological. Now, sometimes ideology is all right. I mean, if it relates to simply a matter of values and aspirations, it can be helpful. But the question becomes, what are we doing to relate the question of increased densities to? What is it foundationally connected to? Is it just something to respond, quote unquote, to the moment? Are we responding to a political movement? Are we responding to state housing pressure? Or what is it that's forming the basis of some of these decisions? So I think it's fine for us to go on tonight and talk about these ideas. I'm not trying to shut off the discussion. What I am saying is that I am interested in, when we get to the part of the discussion, which is the big discussion, which is what kind of community do we want to become? And how do we figure out what that is? And how do we determine what the input to that discussion needs to be to come to a definitive conclusion of some sort? What is it about this community that makes it desirable? What is it that would make the community more desirable? These questions clearly relate to different constituencies. But at some point, for me, it's going to be helpful to have a sense of what we're trying to accomplish, what we want to be. And of course, this is a very difficult thing. You had a couple of maybe more public meeting sessions, and we put dots on boards, but in total, maybe there were, the biggest attendance of those that I attended, maybe 50 people. That's not by any means representative of the community as a whole. So one of my questions that you may be able to answer is, how do we actually gather the kind of comprehensive public opinion about what the community sentiment is, about what it wants? If it's true that greatly increasing the densities in the yellow low residential zones in the community would end the political career of anyone on the city council, well, is that true? And if it is true, why? And how do we know if it's true or not? I don't know what the methodologies that's used in other cities to determine how the vision or the goals are actually determined. So that's one basic question I've got. And if you want, you can answer that now before we get into the substantive discussion of the specific issues you've raised.
Sure. I appreciate the comments greatly. We have not moved away in the big picture in terms of goals, policies, and implementing actions in terms of the practice of preparing general plan updates. We also are very cognizant of the broad and comprehensive nature of general plans, and that they touch on so many different topics. And what we often end up with are what can be conflicting goals. We want to have convenient mobility throughout the community, but we want safe routes to school and minimal traffic. We want to preserve pristine residential neighborhoods and provide additional opportunities for affordable housing. We want to support economic growth and development and be very supportive of local businesses. So there's a push and pull. There's an art and a science in general plans. Our overarching goals are going to be articulated through each and every element of the general plan. And what we're attempting to do this evening is to make sure that we are headed down the right path in terms of some discrete land use specific topics, so that we know what direction we need to go in terms of crafting draft goals, policies, and implementation actions to bring back to the Planning Commission, to bring back to the City Council. And so, thinking of the logistics of all the moving pieces of a general plan update, we really like to nail down our land use philosophies and get a sense of where we're going with development potential and land use changes, so that we can craft the rest of the general plan around that to be supportive of those overarching land use goals. So what we're attempting to do this evening is get the sentiment of the Planning Commission. We're not asking you to vote yes on density increases this evening. We're asking for your input and your feedback, so that as we start to craft the updated land use map and its supporting designations, we know we're headed down the right path in terms of what this commission is looking for. In terms of honing in on what the vision is for the entire community and not just those that chose to take the online surveys or participate in workshops, that's one of the major challenges. The majority of the community does not chime in when asked for input on general plan updates. I've seen this throughout my career across all cities. What we have done is a pretty robust initial outreach phase. We've met with stakeholders, we've conducted visioning workshops, we've done online surveys, we've documented all those responses, and we've posted the community outreach summary report, which synthesizes that feedback, and it's available on the website now, and we presented that at one of our earlier workshops. So I do feel good that we are going to be bringing back in subsequent months a draft general plan with a vision statement, a draft general plan with goals, policies, and implementation actions across the whole spectrum of elements and topics. And our objective this evening is to get Planning Commission input on some very specific land use and density related questions that respond to affordable housing objectives that have been articulated to us, and the kind of the repeated topic that we've heard about, look, we need to talk about tools and methods for more multifamily and affordable housing in Sonoma. So our questions are really geared at those this evening, and our hope is to bundle all of those up to bring you back much more specific details to respond to, but we want to make sure we're headed in the right direction first.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me just pose a couple of other points, and then I want to see what my fellow commissioners have to say, and then we'll get into the specifics. The thinking in the past, and of course the strange thing about planning is we tend to plan for the past, not the future, because we look at what we've been doing and we bring it forward and say, how's that going to change? But our assumptions are all based on the past. We're always looking in the rearview mirror to figure out where we're going. In the past in Sonoma, the decisions were based, certainly in past general plans, that there was going to be growth, but it was going to be manageable growth. And manageability was defined as what the infrastructure could support, what the provision of city services at the level at which the community seems to demand them can support, and therefore the rate of growth that the city could support from an infrastructure and a services standpoint. For example, we've got a sanitation plant through which all the city's sewage runs. The capacity of the sanitation plant is fixed. The last I'd heard, they had somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 new connections available for space in that sanitation plant. What happens when we meet the capacity of the sanitation plant? How much additional population and housing units can the city of Sonoma support, not to mention the valley, which also goes to the same plant, can be supported by the existing infrastructure? The sanitation plant isn't owned by the city of Sonoma. The sanitation plant is owned by Sonoma Water and operated by the water agency. Their projections in terms of their capacity obviously need to be part of this provision and part of any plan. Similarly, the city of Sonoma currently is suffering from a $2 million general fund deficit. It's projecting a general fund deficit of the same amount for the next 5 years. It may be backfilled by a half-cent sales tax increase that's on the ballot for this fall. However, I don't think it's news to anyone here that a half-cent sales tax, any sales tax increase, is a regressive form of a tax. It actually hurts the lower income residents more than it does anybody else. It's a really crummy kind of tax in that respect. That will partially fill the hole for a number of years of the deficit, but as far as I can tell, given the structural difference in the revenue and the expense ratio in the city of Sonoma, even with that 0.5% sales tax, we'll be back in the same situation we are 4 or 5 years from now as we are right now, because the rate of growth of the expense of the city is outstripping the rate of growth of the revenues. So all of these things, to me, play a part in these calculations. At one point in the city, we had something called the Growth Management Ordinance. It basically said that on average every year, and the number varied from year to year, you had a target of a number of housing units or residential units to be built in a year. The Growth Management Ordinance, I think, maxed out at about 65, and it was in that number for a long time. The state has basically invalidated the Growth Management Ordinance. But even so, while it was in place, the average in the city of Sonoma was only 27 units over the last 15 years. The demand wasn't producing more than 27 units, and there was not supply being produced of more than 27 units, for whatever the reasons are. That was even with Sonoma having the lowest development fee schedule at the time of any city of Sonoma County. It wasn't like the barriers to building in Sonoma was because our development costs and fees from the city were too high. They were the lowest in the county. So something else was happening about the dynamic of Sonoma. But the basic premise of the GMO was quite simple, that the rate of growth in the city of Sonoma should be measured so it doesn't outstrip the capacity of infrastructure and city services. So I bring that up only because I don't know if this rush towards housing, which the state is pushing, and the need for affordable housing, which the state is kind of pushing, but it isn't pushing it hard enough to provide any funding for it, is actually going to produce an effect of the city growing too fast, too quickly. I don't know if that will happen, but it doesn't make much sense to come up with a plan that outstrips the capacity of the city to deliver its services or service the residents we have. So that's a concern I have. Now, I'm going to stop talking and let the rest of the commissioners chime in any way they'd like, including on this issue of the goals. Mr. Barbos.
Well, I seriously doubt in other general plan updates where you got a massive turnout of citizens giving input as to goals and priorities. I think probably it's proceeded pretty much along the lines of what we've already seen. A group of motivated, interested people have lent their voices, and others, both inside and outside the community, have done so as well. But what I would like to see us do tonight, because I think some of these things are interesting, starting on page, folks in the audience won't be able to see this, but you will see it if they put it back up on the screen. This is, these are some of the things the staff put together with text boxes for consider existing density, but more importantly, the ones I'm most interested in hearing what my fellow commissioners have to say about are residential land use considerations, proposed general plan residential densities, site-specific land use considerations, which would be there's the church, the Sebastiani property, and I thought there was a third one here, but I only see
Napa
two.
Road.
Napa Road, right. So I mean, I think we're here. I just like to get the sense of, and I think staff would, that's why they put this in the report or the agenda, just to get a sense of what my fellow commissioners think about these specific questions, and we can, for the moment, figure out how they fit into some defined list of goals, policies, and priorities at some later date. But I think we all agree that, maybe all of us don't agree, but I, for one, think we need more affordable housing. We need more housing in general. If you listen to various groups in the community, that's the biggest single impediment for employers, so their workers can't live here. If you want to grow the economy, you got to have places for workers to live. So anyway, that's with that in mind. That's my druthers before I get into talking about any of this, because I think we need to sort of take it one slide or text box at a time. But I would like to go through this and talk just briefly and get feedback from the people that are here. And maybe people in the audience have some feedback on those same points.
Anyone else?
Look forward to the discussion.
Well, we're in the discussion right now, so you don't have to talk about what I brought up. Those were my concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I think my thoughts are a little bit more specific, so I'll direct them to the consultant and to the development director. As far as how you landed on some of the recommendations, right? You're collecting input from community members, you've collected input from the council and from the commission. I think specifically around density, that's what piqued my attention in this case. In this case, around density, and how the density bonus law does or should relate to the recommendations here we have related to kind of inflating our existing base densities.
So I know we're working to get the slides back up on the screen. Yes, state density bonus law would apply on top of any density increases that you may or may not approve, or wherever your general plan lands, state density bonus law would be layered on top of that.
Okay. So I guess my thought is why inflate density when there's already a state law that increases density with the provision of affordable units? My first thought.
One thought would be it doesn't do anything for workforce housing. And state density bonus law is pretty limited in its benefit and application.
Yes, Mr. Willers.
So let's see, I don't even know where to start, but I'll start. I'm intrigued by the idea of codifying.
Get near your mic.
Of codifying triplexes and fourplexes in single-family residential zone. And I say that with the caveat that that it has to be, we have to then come up with objective standards that make those fourplexes so-and-so compatible with their neighborhood. I've always said, from the day that I arrived in Sonoma to the time that I worked on the first affordable housing project that the city had done as a competition, that density has to be successful in our community for it to continue to be received and accepted. If density comes in and produces a series of what is considered as a community of incompatible uses, we will lose density and we will lose the attributes of it. And I'm going to use an example. There's a fourplex on France Street, just off of Broadway. It sits on a 6,600 square foot lot. It's 2 stories high, and I bet no one knows where it is or what it is.
I know.
But it exists in our community as an example of a fourplex in a single-family residential zone adjacent a commercial property. So the idea that a fourplex can't exist on a typical 7,500 square foot lot in the R1 zone is not true. In fact, my son just moved to Minneapolis. We moved him in. He's moving into a 2-story, 4-unit, 1900 era house that was converted into 4 units. His unit is 850 square feet, like the other 3 that are in the property. So that concept of taking a house and making it a multifamily project is intriguing to me. But the idea that the triplex and the fourplex have to become somewhat bigger houses than their neighbors would be allowed to be is not interesting to me, because that's when density becomes an adversary rather than a positive. And I'll give you an example of what that means. If you take a 7,500 square foot lot and you divide up the allowed area in terms of lot coverage and a 2-story height limit, you divide that up into 2 units, 3 units, and 4 units, or maybe 6 units. At 2 units, you get 1,300 square feet. 2 units of 1,300 square feet. So those probably a 2-bedroom house. Could be a 3-bedroom house. You get, with 3 units, you get an average of about 875 square feet. That can be a 1 or a 2-bedroom unit. For a 4-unit project, you're down to 650. That can still be a 1-bedroom unit. And then if you put 6 in, you get a 438 average square footage. So those are 6 studios. And so those units, that fourplex can be a combination of those things. But it's still within the allowable square footage and height of a single-family house. And so in the neighborhood that it exists in, it's not an anomaly. And that's very much what the neighborhood that my son moved into feels like. There's single-family houses, there's a triplex, there's a fourplex, there's another single-family house, there's an armory across the street. But you look at it, and it is what it is. But it's serving a student population, it's serving a young working population near a commercial area. And it works. And as you travel, as I traveled through the rest of the kind of edges of not the city core of Minneapolis, but the edges of Minneapolis, their neighborhoods are filled with this example. And the buildings rarely exceed 3 stories in height, rarely, in those contexts. As soon as you move closer to the city, obviously, things get bigger. We're not Minneapolis, but our neighborhoods are very similar to that. They're traditional, suburban, low-density neighborhoods that have been, over time, modified to accept a changing population, primarily because of the university. And so I think we can objectively codify triplexes and fourplexes into single-family neighborhoods and appropriately, hate that word, but appropriately bring density in a positive way to that environment. I also am concerned because I just got an earlier start, so I'm not quite as old as Larry, but I've been involved in the same number of general plan updates. I have the experience of our last general plan update and what the reality was or has been relative to what our intent and aspirations were. Our intent and aspirations in the mixed use and commercial development is that developers would have a good heart and they'd come in and build residential zoning. They'd build residences along with the commercial aspects of those properties. And instead what we got was either very large, because of the FARs that we applied to accommodate the housing, very large commercial proposals, primarily hotels, or very large townhouse subdivisions, which met neither of the intents or aspirations. And so I think if our intent and our aspiration is to find land for affordable housing, that the affordable housing overlay is the way to do it. Because the density speculates the value of the land. If a developer can put 35 units on a piece of property, And our intent was that that would be worker force housing or affordable housing, then we need to say that along with the 35 units per acre. Otherwise, it's not going to be that way. Otherwise, we're going to get 35 units of market rate townhouse development stacked at the value that Sonoma will bring to it. So we incentivize what we want, we disincentivize what we don't. Everyone has said we've had too many really expensive houses. We need we need a more moderate work housing process. Then we have to codify that. We have to find that, the way in which to manipulate that. But simply adding 35 units to the acre and adding height is not going to produce affordable housing in our environment. Land values are too high, and the value of the end product is too good to pass up for people coming in to develop it. So it's the same problem that we had 2 general plans ago. The first one that we changed and the second one that we changed. We were all trying to do exactly the same thing. We have never, in my experience in this community, we have never not tried to provide a more affordable housing product and try to find ways to do that. The market has driven it in an opposite direction. So we need to counter that. And the market isn't bad. The market just simply does what you allow it to do. And so in the case of the mixed-use project that was proposed at the corner of Broadway and MacArthur, what did we get? At the highest density of 20 units to the acre, what we got were luxury townhouses, 400 square foot apartments to meet the affordable housing, and a little tiny commercial building on the corner. And it was exactly opposite of what was intended under that zoning condition. We've done a little bit in our general plan, or not in our general plan, but in our development code, to modify the waiver process. So we can't have a waiver process anymore. Right now we say it's 50-50, period. Right? So there may be some disincentive into that. Now I'm going to the commercial zoning only. I still think that there's value in at least asking for a residential component relative to a commercial property, as well as on a mixed-use property. And I know that we're not talking about changing that. I would suggest that maybe the experience is the commercial, on a commercial zone property, maybe the mix is different. Maybe you go to what the state allows or requires, essentially, to inhabit a commercial property with residential, that allows the residential. And so, maybe on a commercial property, it's a 2/3, 1/3 mix, commercial versus residential. So 2/3 commercial use, 1/3 residential use. The FAR thing is, and I agree that should come out of I agree that residential heights, lot coverages, and FARs should come out of the general plan. That belongs in the development code. Why it's in the general plan, I don't know. But the FARs do control the ability to build on a property, how much volume you can build on a property. And we increased those FARs to accommodate the residential use. We didn't increase the volumes to accommodate more commercial use. And so in the FAR issue relative to commercial versus residential, I think that they should be proportional to the amount of that form of development that is allowed. In the mixed use zone, we already have the allowance for 100% residential use in the mixed use. There isn't a requirement for commercial use there. In the commercial zone, it's the reverse, basically. You're allowed to do commercial, there's a requirement for residential. And so what I'm saying is in that commercial zone, if it went to 2/3, 1/3, and the FAR is 2, then your commercial development potential for that property is 2/3 of that 2 FAR. So if you get 20,000 square feet, you get 2/3 of that 20,000 square feet as a commercial possibility. If you didn't want to build the residential and you wanted to in lieu out then you in lieu out of that 1/3 of the square feet. So, and so that kind of covers it. That, my concern about densities, I'm for raising densities if they achieve what we're raising densities for. Because I do think we need more workforce housing. I do think that we need more apartment-type housing. Apartments went by the wayside in many communities, and we missed out on it. We didn't build very many apartments historically, and in the apartment boom, we kind of weren't there. And then by the time condos became important, they got shut down because of litigation, and now we don't build multifamily housing anymore because it's just not economic. And so we have to find ways to provide the incentive for building the type of housing that we want to build and disincentivizing that we don't need. That's my recurring conversation.
Let me just ask you a question about the comment on the commercial for a second. We heard from the staff that, or the consultant, I can't remember which, the existing setup disincentivizes commercial development because there are very few developers who can take on a mixed commercial residential project. What's your take on that?
Well, so my take on that is that is true. What ends up happening on small projects that are mixed properties is they usually end up separating each other and become a condominium. So there's a commercial element to the property that condoed out on the property, and then there's the residential component. They don't truly end up as mixed-use properties that are 10 stories high where it's retail at the bottom and 9 stories of residential, or 2 stories of office and whatever residential. That's true in our context. Whether or not this land use policy is disincentivizing commercial development in our community, I don't know where the data actually proves that. My experience here is that commercial isn't really a great, at least certainly right now, isn't that great of a opportunity other than hotels. Hotels here are a really good opportunity. But true commercial development, other retail development, we're kind of maxed out. We don't have a very big demographic to serve all of those retail uses. And I think our size has a limiting force on that, right? The tourism doesn't have a limiting force. My sense is that the tourism industry could grow pretty big. But then, is that self-defeating in terms of a commercial use for the people that live here, or not? Do we get a benefit from? I think we get a benefit from the restaurants that the tourist industry brings. I think we get a lot of benefit as residents here, but there has to be a balance to it as well. So to sum up, I think commercial here is self-limiting. The parcels that we have aren't, well, we don't have big box availability. But the parcel sizes here don't avail themselves to that. What was the last commercial project built in Sonoma? Friedman's was remodeled. Staples was a remodeled auto sales place. Marketplace was remodeled.
It's a new commercial building that is in between WIRICK Chiropractic, actually, right next door to that. I know everybody knows where that is, so. And next to where the other building burned down. So that was our last solely commercial project, and they got a waiver for residential.
Sonoma promotional.
Yes.
Yeah, and, unfortunately, that's a local business. I'm not trying to, that's an unfortunate use of that property, in my opinion. That is some of the highest and best value land for what we're trying to achieve here, and we should zone it as such. Low density commercial like that on that parcel is a missed opportunity, and it's going to be that way for a long time. And we need, if we're looking into the future, those are the kinds of things that we need to look at really carefully and set into motion the opportunities to make those properties convert from a low intensity tax very low tax opportunity property into something that's a higher return for our community.
Well, I want to jump in here for a second if we're on the commercial side. This is a perfect example of planning for the past. The world of commercial uses is undergoing a transformational wave that is just at its beginnings. The hard goods retailers are disappearing. Stores like Staples and the other stores that sell goods are being replaced by internet and Amazon. And this trend isn't going to slide backwards. This is just going to get bigger. So the notion of commercial development of Sonoma into retailing isn't going to be viable. We'll be lucky to retain the retailing we've got. The commercial sectors in Sonoma that will be viable are commercial activities where people gather. Now, one would say that would be hotels and restaurants and wine tasting rooms and venues like that. But here we are looking at another wave of transformation in the hotel business. The hotels in Sonoma are not doing particularly well right now. In fact, hotels everywhere are not doing particularly well. They've been overbuilt, and people, the consumer, isn't really interested in spending huge money at a hotel when they can rent a vacation rental and go there and have a kitchen and a yard and a living room and a space. And that's now all available on the internet at the click of your mouse. This is another transformational wave that's coming along, and I don't think, looking in the rearview mirror, hotels, of course, were the basis of the tourist industry. I don't think it's going to be that way in the future. And so there are so many transformations taking place, big waves of transformation, that carrying forth the assumptions of what works from the past into the future isn't particularly predictable or reliable as a guide. We had a question in part of this material about building the commercial sector and diversifying it and the jobs associated with it. It's certainly an important conversation. It's a huge conversation. I don't know where we'll go with it. Every community is trying to cope with it because even the way people lead their lives is changing so dramatically. There was a time during the first general plan where there was a discussion about how we needed to develop office parks. Well, can you imagine what it would be like if we had big office parks in Sonoma? We'd have buildings that are empty just like they do in San Francisco now because of remote working and the application of high-speed internet. This is another transformational wave that is going to sweep away so many of the things that we think of as perfectly normal attributes of a community. So planning, I think, is undergoing and going to have to undergo a fundamental difference in every way. And so while I support the idea of the commercial development, I wouldn't at this point be able to predict what that looks like or how we could do it because I don't think that any of us know what commercial development's going to look like in the next 10 years. I think 20 years as a horizon for planning is completely misplaced. You're lucky if you can get away with 10 now. 20 years is a look in the future. I mean, think back 20 years ago. Was the internet what it is today 20 years ago? Not even close. Amazon didn't even exist. So the pace of acceleration of change is enormous. It poses great problems for planners. And it poses problems for a community in trying to adjust to a future they can't anticipate. I'll just, my final comment has to do with the housing overlay zone. If I understand the concept of housing overlay zone, it's basically a mandate that in this particular zone, you get this particular density, which is a higher density, but you must build affordable housing. And by I say affordable housing, I don't mean affordable housing by design. I mean affordable housing that conforms to the legal strictures of affordable housing. Is that what a historic affordable housing overlay zone is?
The affordable housing overlay could be anything that you want it to be, as far as it's just an overlay. So let's say it's the commercial zone and you want to put in an affordable housing overlay. What you're doing is you're trying to incentivize the development of affordable housing. So you need to tack on to whatever that overlay is, those incentives that would allow for an affordable housing developer to actually develop that lot. Having that timing, the predictability of approval, things like that, where that's where the affordable housing aspect of it comes in. There are housing overlays. The idea behind overlays is that you're not making what's there non-conforming, and that you're adding on another layer and an opportunity for something else.
Well, in the past, we had housing opportunity sites, is what we call them.
And you rezoned them, and so by doing that, you made what was there non-conforming.
Okay, so the idea of the housing opportunity site is these were sites that were targeted for affordable housing, but they weren't mandated. In other words, if I understand it correctly, the way things changed over time is that even if you put in an application to build something on a HO site, you weren't required to put affordable housing. So my question is, does the affordable housing overlay mandate the kind of development that can be placed there?
If somebody wanted to utilize the overlay, otherwise whatever the zoning is what they would use. So
Okay, so
the
it
idea
doesn't
is just
replace the underlying zoning.
No, it does not.
It
And the
just
housing
provides a
opportunity-
layer of incentives that could be taken advantage of if somebody wants to do that instead of what the underlying zoning is.
Correct.
Okay?
It could be the place that offers the extended density. In other words, if you bring in
No,
100%.
I get it,
No
but it's
use
not a magic.
permit, no design review,
Yeah, but it's not a magic bullet.
a by right.
No.
No, but again, you have to make it actually accessible at that, whatever that affordable housing need is for
Yeah.
that developer to actually want to come and do it, right? So it can't be necessarily just our dream, but it has to be kind of that reality check against what is actually marketable. Otherwise, it's just saying it and not
Okay?
But it does allow for the community conversation, because what you do is you say, these parcels are the parcels we're thinking about that are appropriate for 35, 40 units to the acre densities and three stories high. And you target that and you get the community discussion about it, right?
Okay.
But it's only, those densities and those height limits are only for this use.
I understand, and the underlying principle here is we can't make people build something.
No, but you can incentivize it. And
Right,
you can help.
and so what we can do is incentivize.
And what Jennifer said is the big incentive, time is money. Lots and lots of money. And if you can put forward something that takes that time and money out of the equation, in other words, a streamlined approval process in this context, then you will over-incentivize it relative to what is normally allowed.
Okay, I just want to touch on a couple of these points, Steve. I know you want to make a comment, but I just want to finish my list. I support the increased densities as long as the development standards accompany them, so that we're not ending up with what we don't want. And insofar as the First Congregational Church location is concerned, I support the idea of what they want to do there. I have always supported 100% affordable housing projects in the city of Sonoma, and that goes back all the way to my time on the city council in the early 60s. So I think whenever we have a property owner who's actually interested in building affordable housing, 100% affordable housing, God bless him. It doesn't happen all that often. So I think it's great. And insofar as Napa Road is concerned, I have always been interested in that property because it's at this point like a unkempt forest of trees. It's really quite an odd spot, but it is uniquely positioned next to Nathanson Creek. And I can't recall what the question was, whether we wanted to do mixed use there, was it, I think?
Extension of the commercial gateway.
Yes, and the only concern I have about that designation is that we've had the commercial designation now in place for as long as I remember. And it's basically been a flop in terms of accomplishing what we intended. I mean, the whole idea was going to create and improve this gateway to the city. And there's a lot of buildings and a lot of things that haven't changed a bit in 35 years. I don't really see that the gateway designation is accomplishing what it was we hoped it would do. I'm not sure what the answer to it is, but I think extending the gateway designation to that property isn't bestowing upon it some kind of magic, because gateway designation hasn't done anything.
I think in this case, at least the lot at 200, it allows for an opportunity for like a mixed development if possible or something. I think the idea behind the medium density residential, I mean, the letter says, I mean, they are interested in the residential component of it, but majority of this site is undevelopable because of the creek.
Yep.
And that higher density that's allowed under a commercial gateway, you would go from 11 to 20.
Yeah.
Or from our proposal from 15 to 25 in that area with a commercial gateway, but then allow that flexibility, because if somebody comes in, wants to develop, I don't know, being next to a lumber yard is.
Well, and it's not just the
Best
lumber
use.
yard, it's being next to the busiest road in town. And
A very slim road to get back there too, because the creek.
yeah, so anyway, I'm certainly interested in seeing it developed.
But it could also be zoned as mixed use, because that simply is it's considered a transitional zone between commercial and
Residential.
residential. And, it doesn't have to be zoned commercial gateway just because it touches it, so.
And if you guys aren't attached to commercial gateway, that is an option for you guys, is to.
Well, commercial
Pull back
gateway
from
in
that
our last
idea.
general plan was supposed to have a really specific
I know,
plan
I
done
read
for
it.
the corner, which
I read it.
it didn't
I
never
saw the
occur,
visual.
right? So.
Okay, Steve, you had your finger on the button.
Well, starting with the uncertainty of what the future is going to look like, the one thing we do know, people need houses.
I agree.
And people need more houses than we have here now, and they're going to continue to need more houses. So let's keep our eye on that and worry less about some of these other things. I support the increased densities. We'll have to talk about specifically what they are. I support the allowing of duplexes, triplexes, and possibly fourplexes in low-density residential and Sonoma residential. We'll have to look at what the development limitations are on that and in connection with that. I mean, I don't know that I would be willing to entertain bumping the FARs for those, but I support moving the height limits, coverages, and FARs out of the general plan and keep them in the development code. It's going to be a lot easier to change things if we don't have to modify the general plan. In fact, we ought to do that across the board. Anything in the general plan that's like that, we should put it in the development code and leave the general plan silent on it to make it more flexible. I like the affordable housing overlay idea to incentivize, and I presume that the accelerated design review and density bonus that would accompany that, which would make it attractive to a developer, so it would pencil with a market rate development. The residential densities, I'm just going down those in the audience. I don't know if you can see any of these, but anyway, those, I am certainly supportive of the concept of raising those. I think there was a previous meeting where Mr. Willers advocated getting rid of the maximum densities. You wouldn't get rid of the FARs or that sort of thing, but so that would cap what you could put there, but it would give more flexibility. And I still want to look at that kind of approach to it, give the developer more flexibility. And going back to the question of what to do with the commercial and the 50% housing requirement that we now have versus the 1/3 that Mr. Willers was tossing out as a possible option. I think more discussion on that needs to take place. The only thing we've gotten so far out of that is some contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund of consequence. I mean, the only thing of consequence we've gotten out of that requirement, which has been good. Well, I was disappointed to see the council whack it in half on the hotel. That was not necessary. Anyway, going down the other staff proposals, the site-specific, I'm very excited about the Sebastiani property and what could happen with that, and would like to see it rezoned. The Congregational Church, we've mentioned, I'm 100% in on that, and put an affordable housing overlay, or if that's what needs to do to get there, to keep the church not be a non-conforming use. The Napa Road thing, that's a problematic parcel just because of its location, traffic-wise, and its proximity to the Friedman Brother. I mean, and it backs up to where they have all the forklifts that move all the lumber around. That's going to be a noisy place. Nobody's going to want to live right there. So it probably should be commercial of some sort. And maybe if it is a commercial with some mixed residential, they put the commercial on that side and the residential on the other. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Yeah, rezoning the what is it now? It's public. It's changing that to a park designation. The land that's yeah, that's a fine idea, a good idea. So those are my quick comments to the things that staff brought to us, and I do want to just double back to, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name sitting in the back row, but the idea of the connectivity and building that into development. I want to just say that there are neighborhoods, and I've spent a lot of time walking around the Berkeley Hills because I went to college there, and there are all these amazing stairways and pathways that cut from all these hillside streets right on down. I mean, we could put pathways through developments that would really increase the mobility, but just the ambiance and character and the pace of the city. So thank you for bringing that idea forward, and I think we should look for opportunities to implement that. And that's my comments.
All right, I guess I'll go with my hot takes here. I don't not support increased densities. I think if it's done respectfully and if it's done, to borrow a cringy word, appropriately, to Commissioner Willer's point, I think that's doable. I think that's feasible. I think that can comport with our neighborhoods and the character, which I know is a bad word, but something I do care about. Densities done accompanied by development standards, not dissimilar from what exists today, I think is something that we need to talk about. We do need more housing, and I think there are creative ways to do it, to Bill's point, that are not as offensive as some may think. Generally support the concept of removing FAR and height standards and the like from the general plan. I think those are far better suited and more appropriately placed in the development code. Not opposed to exploring and hearing more about housing overlays and similar housing incentive programs. Admittedly, I don't know everything about them. What I've heard tonight is appealing in some regards, so I would need to do a little bit more research on that before I can take a hard stand. Also excited about the prospect of the rezoning of the Sebastiani property. I mean, that is a place that will be a different place in 20 years from now. And we might as well start thinking about how we want that to develop. Same goes for the Napa Road property. Whether it's gateway commercial or mixed use, there might be some nuance there about which one is more appropriate. I'm open to the consideration of either for those parcels. Those are my quick thoughts.
I should have taken that bio break when you offered it. A lot of, I'm very appreciative of my fellow commissioners' comments, and I feel like I've been very well-schooled, especially Commissioner Willer's, and I appreciate it very much. Overall, of course, my personal feeling is that we absolutely need more housing, and I see it every day in my line of work. And there is, we've recently hit a milestone in this community that 50% of the housing is now either a second home, a weekender, such a thing, or an investment property. 50% is primary housing. And that is rather alarming. And it goes to show you that, you know, Sonoma is just a very, very desirable place to be. We've done a very, very good job in the romance of wine and food and just, you know, it's God's country here. So that is something that I think that we really need to put some real consideration around, is how do we make the housing affordable? You've all created, suggested great ways, but that is a reality. There's also, I think, generationally, we're seeing, you know, people of course want to own their homes, but they don't need the expanse, they don't need the trophy, they don't need, what they want is a comfortable place, but allows them all of the accoutrement of living in a town, the connectivity, the be able to walk, to put, and you know, we're facing closing a junior high and a couple of elementary schools in this town. What does that tell you? I mean, we don't have the young, we are not supporting families in this community. So where the people, and again, I think it's a younger generation, but they're wanting the home ownership, but they don't need all this stuff. They don't need the garages to house the boats and the extra car. That's not what they want. What they want is an experience. They want to have a home where they can get their kids in a good school, but then yet where they want experiences in life. They don't want stuff. They don't want the stuff, and they don't need, you know, the acreage, and they don't need the 5,000 square foot homes. It's just not, I mean, to sell a 5,000 square foot home is really difficult in today's world. And having said that, so there's also a sense of wanting community and kind of almost a commune sense, where people want to be in apartments. They want to be in and they want the shared space, and they want the shared space where, you know, the WeWork concept, which imploded so spectacularly, but the concept is good. They want to be able to go to a communal space and do their work, and still share that. They want that sense of community. That's what I'm seeing. So I don't know where we get to that or where we start providing more of that. I think what people are desiring, but it's not brick and mortar retail. It is not. It's more getting really into a sense of they want the community, they want the feeling of being involved and a part of something, a sharedness, and just that's what I'm seeing. So how we get there, I don't know. And again, I appreciate all of your wonderful comments because it's been very informative to me. I do have a couple specific questions for you. On the site-specific land use, the three that have been mentioned tonight, are these on the table? Are they in process, or are they just in exploratory? Where are they? And then where are these future projects coming down? And how are they going to play out in, developer Jones is coming and they're like, oh, I think I want to acquire such and such that just came up for sale. Where is that? How does that get into the play?
So there are no proposals on the table or anything, otherwise we would not have brought them to you to even have discussion at this point. These are exploratory ideas around individuals that have specifically come to me asking about what's going on with the land use process and how to get involved with it. So that's why we brought them to you with their specific thoughts and ideas about how they want to move forward. And some it may be, a future sale, some may be to develop themselves. I don't know. And we never really know. And even if we approved entitlements, we never know whether they're going to do it themselves or sell entitlements, right?
Right.
So there's always that aspect of it. When you go through a general plan process and we make changes to land use and doing those things, we're going to do an environmental document around the whole land use change. That being said, the idea behind the environmental document is that it'll be robust enough that those properties can then tier off that EIR document with their site-specific issues that they have. Obviously, Napa's got very specific ones around biology with the creek and all the trees that are already there that have been there forever. The traffic on Napa, access, things like that. But, those are that's a site-specific. We're not going to analyze site-specific things in that manner, just in the broader context as a whole. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So as part of that process, then if that is, something that we want to do as part of the general plan process, we would loop them in with that. And then when we do the development code update, we would do that update to all parcels and including those as well.
Thank you.
And development code updates come right after the general plan process and or really quick in succession.
I'll be brief. I want to ditto what Steve said. I agree. You did a great summary. So I'm going to ditto your summary. And I want to add to it a little bit of context. I'm going to go back to where I started. The 6,600 square foot lot with the fourplex on it, and it's in the context of dwelling units per acre, is 26 dwelling units per acre. So there's some context. A fourplex on a 7,500 square foot lot is 23 units to the acre. In fact, a single house on a 7,500 square foot lot, which is kind of the average lot around town, sometimes smaller, mainly smaller than bigger, is 6 dwelling units to the acre, which actually is more density than is allowed by our code for that zoning. So
I did look at all the single-family developments that we've had, and I did note that as well, that they were in the 6 range. Now we give or take all of our streets and things that went in with those developments. I do recognize that it's 8:30, and I know Larry wants to talk too, but I do want to talk a little bit more about residential component and I want to talk about more things other than just housing too. I just want to bring that up.
Tonight?
Oh, well, and I just want to chime in on the issue of eliminating the housing requirement on commercial development over a half acre. And it's been mentioned that it has essentially produced a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I don't want to lose that. And to me, the nexus between commercial development, particularly commercial development of things like hotels that produces a lot of lower paying jobs, and the need for housing makes the value and necessity for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund greater. The BAFA bond has been now postponed for at least 2 years, and what the city hoped for in terms of revenues for affordable housing isn't going to happen. All we've got left is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I was told recently it has $1.9 million in it. That's not much. I keep urging the city council to initiate policies that transfer recurrent, considerable funding into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. For example, the Sonoma Tourism Improvement District is now up for a 10-year renewal with a recommended continuances of its 2%. Well, my opinion is that $1 million a year for promoting tourism to Sonoma is excessive, and I would rather see that amount cut in half, and I'd like to see that percentage that is eliminated go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which combined with the present percentage of TOT would produce $1 million a year for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Unless that fund is built and built rapidly and reliably, the city can't put anything on the table. And the developers need something on the table. You're talking to Mid-Penn. Mid-Penn's going to be talking to you because you're going to give them the land. And that's the only reason they're talking to you. They wouldn't do this project if they didn't get a contribution of something. Something. It's not a total gift. No, I understand, but unless, I mean, the way these affordable housing developers work, the pump has to be primed, and they can leverage that money with federal grants and other monies. The city can't be a player in these affordable housing projects unless it has something to put on the table. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a way to do it. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund potentially could help your project. It's not out of the question. So, to me, disconnecting this housing requirement from the commercial development and not substituting some other methodology of their contribution of money to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is too big a loss. And I'm not exactly sure the best way to do it, but I don't want to lose that money, even though that's not our purview. We're not the city council. But that's just my personal feeling about housing in this town. And if we're going to have more affordable housing, we have to help pay for it. Okay, Jennifer, you had some other things you wanted to go over.
I just want to touch more on the component and why we suggested it. And so just food for thought, and you can comment now or you just for food for thought. So we do have some lots in town that are not selling. And it's because of the residential component, because they're where they're located. And that's where I'm wanting to start the conversation was around, okay, what if we got rid of it in the commercial, and or is it site specific? And maybe it's the 0.5 acres is the issue with some of these lots. So that's why I had GIS up here a second ago. Is because I did pull all the lots that are 0.5 acres in our commercial and our mixed use zone. They're pretty much all in the elbow now. And along Napa and the Sonoma Highway. And so part of the reason why I'm asking the question is that's our service street, right? That's where we go to the chiropractor. It's where I go get my pet's nails cut. We've got the paint guy. We've got a restaurant. Now, I do agree that Staples lot's a little underutilized. And so maybe there's certain specific areas like that Staples lot and a few over that. Maybe there's an overlay specific to that site. The one, as we know, Napa Auto Parts, that's never going to be able to be developed because of the 50-foot setback. I mean, that reaches Sonoma Highway. You can't redevelop that lot ever. What it is what it is. The one across the street for sale, we're really having a hard time figuring out how to reuse that lot.
I thought there was already an approval of a project on that site.
Nope.
Yeah, there was definitely an apartment.
So I'm just saying, like, that's not what's selling. The commercial use is what people are interested in on that lot. And so that's where it's been taken off the market and put back on the market now. And most of the people that have come in to talk to us are wanting commercial uses. They're not wanting the residential aspect. And so this is where my question comes in. That's 0.6 acres right there. And fitting all that. So this is where the conversation and just some food for thought about, are there specific sites that we definitely want to make sure, because we know that maybe they are going to be redeveloped, but we do want to make sure that we're maintaining those commercial. The reason why I looked at the commercial residential components too was to see how many are we doing standalone residential products in our commercial zones too. And some of them make complete sense because it's actually more residential facing. It's Spain Street and things like that. So we have 8 of those. And so still allowing the homes to be, because that's what's marketing right now and selling. We're not saying get rid of that opportunity. We're just asking the question, are there better locations for what, making sure, again, going back to that question, are there certain spaces where we want certain things and maybe we need to incentivize more of what we want in those locations. So I can produce this map for this map for you guys of what I was able to pull out for the acreage wise of just kind of looking at things. There's not really any left on Broadway. This is really the density. And then of course, yes, these are all half-acre commercially zoned and or mixed use. So these are all that are out there, and as we know, like that's new, the lodge. So there's certain things that we know are not, that's our commercial gateway. So I think it's worth looking at on and with further discussion on a site-by-site basis potentially, if that's something of interest. But I just wanted to put that out there as to the why we even brought it up as a discussion point. So that's all.
But and correct me if I'm wrong, we couldn't apply a formula that was site-specific here without sort of accusations of a discriminatory sort of an approach.
We've done it with the housing opportunity at the last general plan. You changed commercial and mixed use to housing opportunity.
In a site-specific way. Okay.
The other question that I had, sorry, while I'm talking about it, we're proposing to go back to 25. And when I say going back, I mean literally it's going back. In 2004 with the general plan, it was 25 and it dropped to 20 dwelling units per acre in the commercial zone, in the mixed use zone. And so we are proposing to just put it back to what it had before.
So the other comment that I'd like to, that I didn't make the last time is that we need to look at high-density residential too. There are no high-density residential parcels in Sonoma. My house sits on the last one. So all the high-density residential parcels have been developed. So we have commercial and mixed use taking their place essentially, and then we have some medium residential zoning and mainly single-family residential zoning after that.
Well, that's interesting, and it kind of ties in part to what Jennifer's analysis is. I don't someone's going to have to educate me about what the intended commercial uses on these commercial parcels are going to be that even make sense in the context of this transformational wave that we're undergoing. I mean, if somebody wants to put in a bowling alley, that would be an interesting commercial option. But we had one and it's gone. If someone wants to put in uses like that, a skating rink or something else where people gather, I mean, these might be viable commercial uses, but commercial use of a strip center with individual stores that sell stuff, not going to happen.
And it's not, because these lots aren't conducive to actually strip centers anymore either. So
what's it going to be?
So those are going to be other different types of service industry uses or other, on Sonoma Highway, because it is Sonoma Highway, lends itself more to the warehouse aspect, the light industrial that we allow, but we don't really have too many locations for. That's been of an interest that support our industries that are around here. I think that's, what a lot of the comments during that I was hearing on what our assets and what our needs are for the community is to live here and to shop here and to work here. And I don't know about you, but pretty much every weekend I'm driving to Petaluma or Napa to kind of fill in my gaps of my shopping at times. And there's or services. My dentist, I have to go to Napa to get my dentist. And I mean, so these are the types of things that living here and working here is just, how do you experience the place and how do we make sure there's continued opportunities to meet those needs? We have an aging population. We've talked about this too. We're going to look at aging in place. A lot of our doctor's offices and things like that we have here serve our community and their needs. So those are the services that we can't buy online. But I do recognize that our larger shopping centers are going to have to change. CVS, Rite Aid, they're half empty now. Staples is half empty. And so looking at those sites too, how do those change? I think we're going to see change with those developments.
Well, and it has impact on the sales tax revenue for the city, and all these things are undergoing a huge shift. And in terms of the facility for seniors, for people who eventually get to the point where they can't live independently in the homes they're living in now, we don't have enough facilities for people to get into an assisted care facility or others. And some of the ones we have are full, and some of them are extremely expensive, and we don't have enough of those multifamily type places where you could offer assisted living. So has there been any, and is there any value in sitting down with the business community, including the Chamber of Commerce, and who they think might be of value to talk about the future of commercial development in the city of Sonoma and see what ideas they have? They've got to be seeing a shift in the market dynamic as well.
I think there's value in having another conversation with not just, the chamber and the businesses, but the realtors that are doing the commercial real estate as well. I had a couple of conversations with like Tina and Ryan. Because I see their names everywhere. That I'm like, oh, I'm going to reach out to you. But having, broader conversations and a focused group discussion around it, I think has some value. I don't want to push it or anything like that. I just want the reason why I added it. That's all.
Okay.
With Bill's comment about there being no more high-density residential, and you showing us this map of these, quite a few commercial parcels over a half acre, maybe we should consider rezoning some of those to provide for that sort of density residential.
Or adding that housing, affordable housing overlay
On the property.
on those
Well, that would be an
properties.
intriguing idea, I think.
So the careful thing about the affordable housing zone, because it's intrinsic in our development code that we don't want a affordable housing zone in our city. We want affordable housing interspersed with our community. And so finding the Staples site, 2 acres of land that serves as a hub for Staples to deliver its online products to, as an example, which has a very low tax increment, by the way. If you look at the tax increment that's on that property for the 2 acres, it's pretty darn bad, put it that way, what the city gets out of that 2 acres of property. But also what I wanted to say is we have to, I don't want to zone properties in a way that we end up with the trophy and badge store. It's a great small business, but it's occupying extremely valuable land in our community at a very low service rate to the community. And so we have limited land. Each parcel is very valuable from the standpoint of the future. And what is our most important need? Is our most important need another mom and pop store that sits on a half acre of land with a little parking lot out in front of it? Or is it a half acre piece of land that can serve 12 units or 15 units of housing? And, Mid-Penn isn't going to build that housing, but if you make it at a density high enough, private developers will. And it'll be, you bring the densities up high enough, the housing is going to be small enough to, and especially if we bring our minimum densities up. And that's why I suggested last time, is if you eliminate the density cap, and you bring the minimum to what you say that parcel should deliver to the community, and you allow the development group to figure out what it wants to do, that's the way in which and then you conform it by setbacks, height, and coverage, right? FARs, maybe we just junk FARs. We just take an envelope of space that you can develop in. And you do that, and you let someone figure out, okay, I can't build fewer than 11 units on this property, but I can build as many as I want. So maybe I'm going to get a couple more keys and a couple more rentals here by making some of them smaller and making some of them bigger. That'll help, and it'll balance out. That's, to me, what these parcels should be utilized for. And the affordable housing overlay, maybe there are some parcels that are large enough to put that overlay onto. Staples 2 acres, 50 units at 25 units to the acre, or at 35 units to the acre at 70, right? Maybe that's how we go about planning this. But maintaining an underproductive commercial strip, maybe CVS becomes the chiropractic office. It's beyond, maybe it's better for them to be in the center of town than on the strip of Napa Road. And maybe it's better for some housing to be on Napa Road than over CVS. Because it's more economical to put it there than it is on an existing building. But an existing retail space that's 20,000 square feet can be divided into small services very easily with abundant parking, right? You don't have to change anything. And so CVS goes out of business, Wells Fargo becomes an ATM on the corner, a kiosk on the corner. What's that building going to be? They just remodeled, but if you go in there and you look at their remodel, the remodel got rid of people.
And if you want to if you want to close out your safe deposit box, you can't just walk in and do it. You have to make an appointment. Caitlin, yes, would you like to add something quickly? I'll open the public portion.
Greatly appreciate it. Just a couple thoughts. The Visitors Bureau, the Chamber, the Vintners and Growers Alliance, the hospital, the school district, those are all members of the collaborative. And when we have talked, especially to the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber, about, you know, what they need, because that's what we do, what small business needs in Snow Valley, what they always say is housing, 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 housing. They don't say they need more space for business. They can't keep open the businesses that they have because of housing. So you've probably heard that before, but I wanted to bring that up. And another point.
And that's because their employees need the housing and they can't get the employees?
The employees and even the owners, you know, the owners of the small businesses can't afford to be here either. So it's the housing that the market is not producing. It's the middle and below. That's what they need. So, and another point I wanted to just jump up here and say is that even though the future is really uncertain, and I'm just saying this based on these years of working with this array of people, even though the future of land use needs is uncertain, one thing that is not uncertain is that a community needs to provide for its members. And like humans who live here and work here, as you all know, are getting pushed out. And like that's a real certainty. And if we don't address that, then none of the other stuff matters. So I don't think we have to know exactly what the future of retail and commercial is to know that we have this huge problem to solve about housing our own people. Third point, I'm going to be very quick, is it would be awesome if small units in Sonoma were affordable, could be affordable. They do not appear to be so. It does not really appear that it's possible to build affordable by design here. And so when you think about increasing densities, allowable densities, please always think about these two lanes, market versus what the market will not produce. It appears around here that unless you make policy that makes different rules for below market housing, we won't have any of it. Because the market is not going to produce it here. We're so desirable, we're so expensive. Doesn't matter how small you get, how dense you get, those units will still be someone flying in to enjoy a wine weekend, and they won't be affordable. So the affordability needs its own set of rules. Otherwise, we're just not going to have it. Thank you.
Yeah, actually at the goals earlier this year, Mark Bodenhammer came up and in a very humorous way was like, I've got 10 reasons I'm here, and they're housing, 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 housing. You get the picture. I mean, this is coming directly from the business community. And the fact that Jennifer has to go to Napa for her dentist is mind-boggling to me. That's a bad sign, a really bad sign. In terms of the commercial properties, I mean, there's actually a law, and I can't remember the designation off the top of my head, that helps facilitate the process of converting commercial developments into residential and providing incentives and policy to help boost development there. But we can do it ourselves. It's very, very easy, and it sounds like there might be some interest, and we should absolutely move forward with that. I mean, to your point, we are seeing a massive shift. I don't go to stores often. I order online. And actually, thank you. You were spot on, Commissioner Nugent, well, actually, everything you said was spot on. Everything you described is exactly what I like. And as, well, you might be around my age, but as probably the youngest person in this room, I can tell you those are the things we want. Those are the things we need. I want an ADU. I don't want a big home. I want an ADU. That's all I need. I'm a very simple guy. And so we need to create the housing that accommodates that. We need a ton more of it. There was a Connor Doherty article in the New York Times today. I highly encourage everyone reads it. We need to be building 1.6 million homes every year. We are building 1.2 or less. So every year that deficit of housing is growing. And our population is growing. So if we don't find a way to solve that, well, we're I think you can obviously imagine what's going to happen. So at the end of the day, I just uplift and echo everything Caitlin said. Like, we need to build housing for the people. And I know this isn't all the technical detail stuff, but I just felt compelled to say this because we have to act. And we need to throw everything on the wall, especially with the affordable housing overlay. I highly encourage you to talk with Namada Merriman at MidPenn. She is the smartest person in affordable housing. Any person in the housing world will tell you that. The woman is brilliant and has a lot of great ideas. I would speak with her. And I would also recommend speak with Larry Florin, Ben Wickham at Burbank. Both of them are brilliant. And have Greg Davis come out and talk about the sewage and water. Or you can watch the YouTube video of the webinar that I actually think pretty sure I presided over that. It was actually him and Suzanne Smith, former director of SCTA, that talked about infrastructure. We have that on our YouTube channel, so I highly recommend you read it. And please, we have a lot of research products we put out as well that discuss a lot of these issues and data to back it. So I also really encourage you to take a look at it when you have some time. It's all on our website. I'll leave it there, and like I said, I'll follow up with a letter, but thank you.
Just to, go ahead.
Last but very short. I don't think anyone would disagree with me, but the idea that I don't want to lose sight that we can have co-benefits, because the idea of what you're saying earlier, Teresa, that the experiences that people want, the idea of having corridors and linked areas, when I was looking at the raw data, people are talking about wanting to have connections, and that's the only thing that I think that we haven't pulled out strongly enough. And so housing is extremely important, but it's connections of people and communities that's co-located with housing. So you can't have housing without ensuring that people have a way to move safely between areas so that they're getting to spaces that they need to get to. So I work with also senior communities. I work with the tourism department as well, and the idea is having all this co-located. And so one asset can't be in isolation, and so these communities need to be connected, and that's part of what makes Sonoma special, but not if we have barriers. And housing and co-location with our pathways is not a binary choice. It must be both. And so that's the only thing I want to leave you with. Thank you very much. Oh, and also the overlay, green space overlay might be a way to deal with the idea of affordable housing, but use green space overlay as a way to think about co-location, because nobody uses that more than people who need affordable housing, quite frankly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll bring it back. Any final comments from the group?
On this agenda item?
On this agenda item?
No, but I have a commissioner comment.
Okay.
Afterwards.
Is there anything left to add, Jennifer? No? Okay. Then we will move on to commissioner comments.
Okay, this is actually an idea that's already been mentioned tonight, but having people who live in houses that are so clearly not historically significant have to go through the expense of paying for the study is awful. We need to fix that. That should not ever happen. A little modest house does not need to spend thousands of dollars proving that it is not historically significant. So maybe it's the way that Carol Marcus suggested, that we do it by a whole neighborhood, the city does it, but however we do it, and I don't have enough knowledge to know how to get there, but all I know is we got to get there.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner comments?
To piggyback on that, I think that we need to open up, and we've had this conversation, we need to open up the historic design review whole topic again. And I put it in this context. When a project comes in that has an HRE, nothing happens until the HRE and your approval of it. No further action is taken until that happens. And that's a many month-long process. And so if the owner would be willing to take a risk that the outcome would be positive, and they could basically submit their documents to be able to be reviewed prior to that process being effectuated. They could come out of the gate ready to build. Both of these projects now will be able to submit their projects for review for construction. And that's another multi-month process. So, and I said earlier, time is money.
Look forward to talking more about that, Bill.
Okay, Jennifer, do you have any report or comments?
I don't have a report, but just a reminder that our next Planning Commission meeting is a special meeting as well on September 17th. Okay, so Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And I know you're absent, but I am going to go ahead and just I'm going to jump Therese and Matthew, sorry, and bring a couple of streamlining things that just based on conversations that we've had that we're just going to go ahead and move forward with.
We've actually calendared. We may beat you to it.
Okay. I actually already wrote them. But the ones that we've already talked about as a group of, moving forward with some different things. But there's obviously a lot more that we can do. These are just some low-hanging fruit that I've identified based on what we've been seeing in our meetings, and that there really hasn't been discussion really around. And then also continued discussion on SB9 and some others. And just a reminder, we are getting our 2 new planners. So Monday we'll have the first will start, and then on the 9th we'll have the second. So you'll meet them on the 17th at Planning Commission. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate, I will not be in attendance at our next meeting in September. I will be on vacation. Okay, may I hear a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you.